My name's Austin Molt. I'm 24 years old. I'm a youth pastor in Tri-Cities, Washington, and I don't have that great of a story. It's not a story that you would look up on YouTube. It's not one that would go viral on Facebook. I grew up with two parents who were Christians, so our household was a Christian household with Christian values. I grew up going to Vacation Bible School as an elementary kid. I went to camp as a high school and middle school student. I went to youth conferences, prayer meetings, Sunday services, and everything else. I was ingrained in church. I never got involved in partying or drugs or gangs. I was far from perfect, but I don't have some type of story that's super dramatic that you would watch and probably be super inspired by. But I will tell you this, I have lived my whole life being a part of the church, and I really have seen over the last few years more and more Gen Z and millennials criticize and get away from church. I mean, they're saying this stuff's happening at record numbers, and it's been alarming to me. Me being somebody who's grown up in church my whole life, I don't even know if I'd be following Jesus today if it wasn't for the people that God had put in my life when I was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. I don't know if I would even met my wife, or she would even be a Christian today if it wasn't for some of the people that were in her life when she gave her life to the Lord. And so it's interesting to me to see kind of Christian culture step away from church for whatever reason. But it's always been different for me. I had friends who were also pastors' kids, and they didn't like church. They felt like it was shoved down their throat. They felt like it was forced on them. They felt like church was a burden, but it never felt that way for me. And I'm not making that up. I mean, I just remember growing up thinking, I love church, I love God, I just love this stuff. In fact, I wanted to be a preacher. I can remember being 10, 11, 12 years old, and the lead pastor at our church growing up asked me to share a 5-minute message on faith. And it was right before his message. I had no idea why he asked me to do that, but I was ecstatic. I wrote my 5-minute message. A few days before, my dad pulls me into his office at the church and says, "Hey, why don't you practice your sermon?" It was extremely awkward as a 12-year-old to practice a sermon you've never done before in front of one person, your dad, in an office. But I did, and it was amazing. I felt like this was what I was made to do. So church always felt like it was the final destination for me. So I graduated high school, I started doing Bible college online, I became a youth pastor. And if you've ever worked like in a restaurant, you have more sympathy when you go to a restaurant and it's really busy because you've been behind the scenes, you've been the waiter or the waitress, you know what it's like. And I feel like since working in a church, I have a new level of sympathy for church and for ministry because I've worked behind the scenes. And it's been interesting because the more you're in church, the more of the good and the ugly you see. And the reason is because people are people, right? Jesus says, "Come everyone, no matter what you're dealing with, all these imperfect people, you need God." And so we have that message in our church. And then all these imperfect people come and people freak out when somebody hurts them, says something bad about them, or something goes wrong. It's like, guys, this is what church is. It's learning to forgive. It's learning to love. But we have this like weird expectation on people. I remember T.D. Jakes one time saying, "We give ourselves the grace to evolve while demanding other people to be their finished product." It's easy to be critical, but I think the reason our generation is critical of church is because they're not invested in church like they should be. I remember when my wife and I moved into our apartment. We didn't own it. We felt like we were throwing money away at rent. A year and a half later, we ended up getting our first home. And now it's our home. We have a contract saying that we own this home and we are going to invest in our home. It'd be very difficult for us to actually leave our home because we've built memories there. We love our home. We've put money and time and effort into our home. If it was just some empty space like an apartment that we didn't own and we couldn't customize and make it our own home, then yeah, we wouldn't be very invested. It'd be easy to leave. And I feel like a lot of people, it's easy for them to criticize church, to leave church, to walk away from church because they're not invested in church. They don't give money to church. They don't serve in church. They don't pray with and for the church. You need to be invested in the church, or you're at risk of just being a critical walk-away person of God's amazing, beautiful, glorious, and imperfect church. Just like we want people to give us another shot, give them another shot. Forgive like Jesus forgave you. Love like Jesus loved you. Be committed to these people. You know, if the plumbing goes wrong in our house, we don't get to just leave because we're frustrated. We have to get the job done. And if something happens in your church, don't just leave because you're frustrated. Get the job done and grow together. I even remember growing up, my pastor telling me how the Bible says that the church is God's bride. And you would never walk up to somebody and say, hey man, can we hang out? I love you, but I really don't want to see your wife. I don't like her. He wouldn't like it. That wouldn't go well with him, because that's his bride whom he loves. They are one. And I think when we're critical of the church, I think when we put unrealistic expectations on the church, I think we need to think more in terms of this is God's bride. Though she's imperfect, though she doesn't have it all together, and though at times she seems really divided, Jesus died for her and he loves her. So maybe we need to have a perspective shift that when you invest in church, you're actually investing in people. And when we get to the end of all of this, what will it matter if we drive a nice car, live in a nice house, live in a nice area, but we did not make a difference in people's lives?